Best practices for managing all of these risks is, well, frankly, it's very much multi-tiered. And again, once we start getting to the paperwork and actually, building this plan, your plan should have all of these in there if your organization doesn't already have some items in here too. So let's, two things. Whenever you're hired by an organization, I'm sure they'll have some of these things. But number two, the book really focuses just on the IT infrastructure, which frankly is probably what you're interested in too as well. But there are other facets to this that are not IT related that you have to worry about, like physical controls, which I have towards the bottom here somewhere. But just a heads up with that. You can eliminate, so let's reduce the impact of a risk. That's what you're trying to do with all of this. I talked about creating a policy. Creating a security policy is important because you're trying to dictate to those that are within the organization, which again is where most of the problems actually happen. Like, don't do this, do this, don't do this. You want to spell things out so they can't come back and say, oh, you didn't tell me either. So it's really important to have a security policy. That's not hard to create or do. And in many cases, you can probably copy from somewhere else and then use it for yours. So not reinvent the wheel here. But it's really, really important to do because if you have an employee that constantly violates this, that's a problem. That's a massive risk. Purchasing insurance. It should be a no-brainer, honestly. But purchasing insurance, really important to do. But there is the principle of proportionality. Is it worth the investment to buy the insurance for the particular asset? If the asset is worth $50 to replace, but you have to spend $500 on insurance, that doesn't make sense, right? So there's going to be some items or some assets within the organization that's just not worth it. But there's certainly going to be some other ones that are definitely worth it. So think about that when we have insurance, we should have it. Using access controls is, we're going to talk about that much more in depth in Chapter 3 and starting in Chapter 4, but just giving you a kind of 10,000-foot view here. Well, you would be granting users privileges for their jobs to certain access to certain pieces of data, and that's it. So there's two overriding train of thoughts when it comes to this. Principle of least privilege, where we're granting users only the rights just enough for them to do their job and no more, because they really don't need to. That's the one. Or we could do the principle of need to know, where granting users only the rights to the data enough for them to do their job. So something to think about, especially again in your security policy as well. So two principles we need to worry about. Automating. Automating is good for, well, good and bad. Automation makes things go faster, and you have some type of input validation, which is really the next one there. But also it gets rid of the human aspect of this. That might be, well, because again, where does most of the problems come from? It's usually those of us that are in the trenches. So that's one way of automating anything that you can to eliminate any human error or possible of human error is a good thing to do. Talked about validation. Providing awareness training. Even here at the university, they do training on phishing, clicking unknown links, not clicking on emails you don't know who they're from, that type of thing. They even do that at the university. So can you imagine what they do at an organizational level? That needs to happen. Using antivirus software, I can't believe that anybody wouldn't do that, but still. And then finally, protecting the boundary. So there's IT and there's a physical part of it. In the IT, we need some type of intrusion prevention system, firewalls, DMZs, IDSs. There's a whole bunch of things. I got to see some really neat ones for some insurance companies down in Texas. That's what they're constantly monitoring. Where's the threats coming from? Where's this strange, IP coming from, and other items like that. It's really amazing what they do. But there's also physical as well. If you have a generator system that's on the premises that in case of electricity goes out or data storage somewhere, you need to physically protect that as well. So that's another aspect of managing all the risks. These are the things to look at when it comes to making sure that you have a great overall sense of, well, trying to reduce the impact of a risk. For your exercise, I want you to find an example of a lack or a logical access control for a business. Now, be very careful about this, okay? So logical is one, and the other one is physical access control. Now, physical access control is simply like a key. I don't want you doing a key, but there's other aspects that we can use that are very much like a lock system that I want you to find. Again, you're going to give me a link. You're going to give me, I'm going to update the instructions on this. You're going to give me a link. You're going to give me a general description, and that's it. That's all I want. But I want you to kind of dive in there to see what other controls that are out there that you're going to have to use when you're managing your type of risks.